At the heart of every beloved game lies a world so rich that when you play it, you believe in it. The kind you dream about when you've logged off and carry with you years later like an old memory. Some games capture that spark and never let it go, while others fall flat no matter how much content they pack in. World building and immersion makes all the difference, and it's the reason one sci-fi RPG stands tall while another struggles to leave a lasting mark. In this video, we'll dive into how Obsidian crafted a unique and believable universe in the Outer Worlds, drawing on the studio's Fallout New Vegas pedigree, and contrast it with the safe, forgettable choices Bethesda made in Starfield. Spoiler alert, we'll be covering the plots of both The Outer Worlds 1 and Starfield. I'm Captain Katarn, and here we dig into the games that shaped us and the stories behind them. If that sounds like your thing, get subscribed because there's plenty more stories to uncover. Obsidian's talent for world building can be traced back to its work on Fallout New Vegas, launched in 2010. New Vegas was acclaimed for its rich narrative, faction dynamics, and player choice, elements that many felt were lacking in Bethesda's own Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. Obsidian carried forward the original Fallout DNA of deep role-playing and moral ambiguity. It's no surprise then that when original Fallout creators Tim Kaine and Leonard Boyarsky led development on The Outer Worlds, the shorthand was New Vegas in space. They openly embraced the comparison, even saying, "It's our pedigree" in interviews rather than shying away from the Fallout comparison. This laid the foundation for a new universe with familiar roots, a focus on player agency, dark humor, and reactive storytelling. When The Outer Worlds launched in 2019, it introduced players to Halcyon, a remote star system run entirely by megacorporations. Obsidian crafted a world that was both wildly imaginative and scathingly satirical. An alternate future where President McKinley was never assassinated, and the monopolistic trusts of the early 1900s were never broken up. The result is a corporate dystopia taken to absurd extremes. In Halcyon's colonies, every aspect of life is controlled by company brands and profit motives, which paradoxically makes the setting feel believable in its own darkly comic way. For example, the very first town you visit, Edgewater, is a Spacer's Choice Company town in which workers toil in a cannery and even have to prepay for their own graves as part of the company policy. A graveyard attendant immediately ropes you into collecting debts from the families of deceased laborers, an introduction to Halcyon's cheery corporate doublespeak covering for human misery. Everything in the Outer Worlds has just enough dysfunction to function, the food's synthetic, the booze is cheap, and the people are disposable. It's played for laughs, but the biting commentary on consumer culture and exploitation hits uncomfortably close to home. Crucially, Obsidian makes this world reactive to the player's choices. In Edgewater's pivotal quest, you must choose to divert power either to the town, upholding corporate authority, or to a camp of deserters who fled Edgewater's harsh conditions. This decision isn't black and white. Either choice has complex repercussions for the people living under or escaping from corporate rule. Throughout the Outer Worlds, your actions influence faction reputations, companion relationships, and even which ending you get. Obsidian's Fallout heritage shines in these moments. Unlike Bethesda's design, which often funnels everyone toward a similar end, Obsidian allows for radical divergence. You can talk your way through conflicts, sneak around them, or blow everything up, and the game still finds ways to acknowledge your approach. In fact, the developers proudly ensured that it's possible to complete the game despite killing all NPCs if you really want to be a lone psychopath. That level of reactivity and freedom is rare. It harkens back to the immersive sim-like freedom of New Vegas and even classic Fallout. What makes Halcyon feel truly alive are the little stories and characters that populate it. Obsidian's knack for memorable companions is evident with crew members like Parvati Holcomb, an awkwardly sweet engineer who struggles with her identity, or Vicar Max, a priest with a crisis of faith. They react to your choices and even chime in on quests, making them feel like real participants in the world rather than quest vending machines. The writing balances cynicism and heart. One minute you're chuckling at a goofy corporate slogan, "It's not the best choice, it's Spacer's choice," and the next you're moved by a companion's personal revelation. All of this builds a universe that, while zany and satirical, has an internal consistency and emotional core that players can invest in. Obsidian established a strong lore foundation in The Outer Worlds 1, from the structure of the Halcyon Holdings corporate board, to the terraformed planets like Monarch and Terra 2, to the everyday plight of colonists caught between starvation and company propaganda. Obsidian isn't stopping with just one colony. The Outer Worlds 2 is on the way and aims to go bigger and bolder while keeping the soul of its predecessor. The sequel's tongue-in-cheek announcement trailer in 2021 even joked that the devs hadn't finished the story or gameplay yet, highlighting the same self-aware humor fans love. the game will take us to a brand new star system called Arcadia with a new crew and protagonist. Story-wise, The Outer Worlds 2 is set to tackle new facets of the universe's lore. Interestingly, you play as an Earth Directorate agent sent to Arcadia, which marks a shift in perspective. In the first game, Earth was a distant origin with no direct involvement, but now Earth's government is stepping in. Arcadia is an isolated system rich in resources and notable as the place where the skip drive, interstellar travel tech, was invented. This invention has caused some unintended side effects. Space-time rifts are opening and disrupting interstellar trade, essentially tearing holes in the fabric of space due to overuse of the technology. Worse, a familiar corporate villainy is afoot, a corporation called Andy's Choice, an offshoot of the ubiquitous Andy Clio brand merged via hostile takeover of Spacer's Choice from the first game, launches a full-scale invasion of Arcadia to monopolize those resources. So even with a new setting, Obsidian is doubling down on its central theme of evil megacorporations running amok. The devs have even laughed about the irony of making a game about corrupt corporations while being owned by Microsoft, so clearly the satire is intact. Expect factions old and new. The Earth Directorate might serve as a more principled counterweight to the corporate board this time, and Andy's Choice sounds like a major antagonist faction. The tone remains delightfully sharp, and The Outer Worlds 2 carries a self-aware humor that mocks industry norms, poking fun at sci-fi tropes, and maybe even Bethesda's style. In fact, a trailer joked the game took 3 times longer to make, but will almost certainly be 2 times bigger than the original, meaning more handcrafted content and likely a happy medium between the tight 20 to 30 hour original and Bethesda's 100+ hour sprawl. Obsidian seems keenly aware of the comparisons to Starfield and appears to be finding a sweet spot by preserving the tightly woven narrative and sharper tone of The Outer Worlds while addressing players' desire for a bit more open-ended exploration and scale. The Outer Worlds 2 is poised to be Obsidian's answer to Starfield, not by outdoing Bethesda in sheer size, but by delivering meaningful choices in a world with real personality. Now let's turn to Starfield, Bethesda's ambitious space RPG that launched in 2023, to see how its universe stacks up. On paper, Starfield had all the ingredients of an epic. A vast galaxy of 1,000+ planets, multiple factions, ship combat, and the pedigree of the studio behind Skyrim and Fallout 4. But in execution, Starfield's world building came off as surprisingly bland to many players and critics. In contrast to the bold satire and tight focus of The Outer Worlds, Starfield offers a more generic sci-fi setting that's so broad it struggles to say anything meaningful. You're a lone space explorer in the settled systems, a mostly peaceful future society recovering from a recent war. And indeed, when the game begins, Starfield feels like it doesn't really have that much to say. You start as a miner in a boring, Earth-like moon outpost, a strangely mundane kickoff for a space epic, and the early hours involve a lot of doing errands in a utopian city, New Atlantis, where nothing dramatic is happening. Bethesda intentionally designed the settled systems as stable, even stagnantly comfortable. As one of your companions, Sarah Morgan, explains, society has settled into a post-war peace and has the raw cultural excitement of a furniture storehouse. In other words, it's boring by design. The idea was to give players a low-stakes world that they could stir up eventually, but the side effect is a setting that lacks the immediate hook or distinctive flavor that Halcyon had. Exploration in Starfield is also a double-edged sword. Yes, you can technically land on countless planets, but the majority of them are procedurally generated and unremarkable to explore. Instead of handcrafted alien vistas full of narrative context, you often find empty landscapes that, while realistic, feel lifeless. Much of Starfield's universe is empty and dull like actual outer space. Random encounters exist, but they're repetitive. The same few pirate outposts, the same creatures reskinned on different worlds. After visiting around 15 planets, the exploration starts to feel repetitive, as if you've already seen it all before, only in different colors. Narratively, Starfield also takes a safe approach. Bethesda avoided controversial or deeply philosophical themes and delivered a straightforward hero's journey about discovering mysterious artifacts and the secrets of the universe. There's no biting commentary here, certainly nothing like Outer Worlds' lampooning of capitalism. The factions in Starfield are serviceable, but they boil down to familiar archetypes: space marines, space cowboys, space pirates. The game doesn't really critique or explore these factions in a nuanced way. You can join all of them with few lasting consequences, and the world remains largely static. There is no equivalent of Edgewater's agonizing choice or New Vegas's faction wars. In fact, Starfield's main story has no significant branching outcomes. Everyone basically gets the same conclusion and New Game Plus mechanic, which, while interesting, is more of a meta commentary on replayability than a comment on the world itself. Early on, There's no ominous threat to the universe, no dystopia to overthrow, and no urgency attached to your role, as one review pointed out. You're not the courier deciding the fate of New Vegas or the stranger rousing Halcyon's colonists. You're essentially a traveler collecting artifacts. Bethesda wanted players to feel weirdly free and unpressured by narrative urgency. An interesting design experiment, but it left many players unengaged for dozens of hours. As that same review concluded, Starfield is so focused on letting you simply exist in its world that most of its conflict for roughly its first half is either toothless or meaningless. Even when conflict does ramp up later in Starfield, the storytelling remains lukewarm. The characters have been criticized for being forgettable. Companions like Sarah, Barrett, and Sam Coe are likable enough, but they lack the standout charm of an Obsidian companion. Their dialogue is often professional and sterile, as if written to avoid offending anyone. They lack nuance and detail in their personalities. In fairness, this restrained approach might be deliberate given the game's context, as you often interact with them in a formal capacity, as a fellow member of Constellation or a galactic ranger. But deliberate or not, it contributes to the overall sense that Starfield's world is bland. A collection of safe sci-fi tropes, but lacking the spark of originality or the emotional stakes that stick with you long term. The phrase many use is that Starfield feels sanitized and a Bethesda by the numbers experience. There's little of the weirdness or edge that older Bethesda titles had, such as the twisted quests in Oblivion's Dark Brotherhood or the eerie vault stories in Fallout. Compared to New Vegas or the Outer Worlds, which dared to be irreverent, Starfield comes across as corporate, which is ironic since the Outer Worlds is the game actually about corporations, yet it has far more personality. Starfield certainly isn't a commercial failure. It attracted millions of players via Game Pass, but in the court of public opinion, it didn't ignite the passion that Skyrim or Fallout did. Post-launch, the discourse was dominated by critiques of its emptiness and lack of innovation. Bethesda stuck very closely to its known formula. Starfield often feels like Fallout 4 in space, with crafting, shipbuilding, and fetch quests aplenty. And that formula, after so many years, just isn't as impactful anymore. It's a perfectly serviceable, mostly competent safe game that doesn't go out of its way to innovate. Safe is the key word. Bethesda didn't take big risks with world design or story, and thus delivered a product that's surprisingly forgettable. Perhaps the greatest legacy of Starfield will be the Star Wars Total Conversion mod after all. In the battle of world building between the Outer Worlds and Starfield, the verdict comes down to vision and risk. Obsidian's team poured their quirky hearts into crafting Halcyon, a universe that says something about society, invites you to influence its outcome, and isn't afraid to be weird or subversive. Bethesda, by contrast, gave us a massive but oddly impersonal galaxy, meticulously designed to offend no one, but in doing so failing to truly inspire many. Starfield's safe approach left it feeling like a beautiful hollow shell, a galaxy of content with surprisingly little soul. The Outer Worlds may be a smaller solar system by comparison, but it feels alive and resonant, full of memorable characters, moral dilemmas, and a distinct identity. It's the difference between a theme park with every attraction imaginable but no cohesive theme, and a rich theater production on a limited stage that leaves you thinking about its message long after the curtain falls. With The Outer Worlds 2 around the corner, Obsidian has a chance to show the world once again that you don't need 1,000 planets to make a stellar RPG. You just need a world that players believe in, one with history, conflict, humor, and consequence. All signs indicate they're aiming to deliver exactly that, building on their traditions from Fallout New Vegas and The Outer Worlds 1. If Halcyon was any indication, Arcadia will be another wild ride, a place where your choices can upend corporations or ignite wars, and where every quest has a twist and every faction has a perspective. And unlike Starfield, it won't shy away from making a statement. As gamers, we're lucky to have both approaches in our cosmos. Sometimes we want the endless sandbox, other times we crave the handcrafted adventure. But if you're like me and prefer a universe that grabs you from the get-go and makes you care about its outcome, then games like The Outer Worlds really speak to you. In the end, building a new universe isn't just about planets and graphics, it's about the ideas and heart behind it. Obsidian remembered that. Bethesda, for all its technical achievement, might need to look to the stars, or perhaps to Halcyon, for a reminder of what makes a universe impactful or risk the Elder Scrolls 6 being a flop. Time will tell if Bethesda learns to evolve, but in the meantime, Obsidian's universe is expanding, and it's one I can't wait to get lost in. One thing's for sure though, Bethesda may not take risks with new ideas, but they'll never hesitate to sell you a new edition of Skyrim one more time. If you made it this far, you're awesome. Consider subscribing and let me know what game I should cover next in the comments. Check out my main channel with Star Citizen content and commentary if you're into sci-fi, and I'll see you in the verse.